On the intake manifold, there's a shaft, and this carburetor both share this air passage with these butterflies closed. These butterflies don't open until about halfway throttle or anything past moderate or I guess light acceleration. But there are little bushings that go on here. They are spindle shaft seals, actually, that's what they are. This one feels pretty good here. This one's got a little bit of wiggle on it, probably more than my spare manifold, but the spare manifold I have there has some cracks in it, and I'm not going to live with cracks. I'd rather have an uncracked manifold, even if it's the dirtier of the two, with a slightly worn shaft. We don't want a vacuum leak there, so that air seal, or that little black rubber seal, will really help. You can get them from VP for $7. Moss Motors has them for about $1.99, because I only need 3 for this car. There's 1 for the carburetors and 2 for the shafts here. Why is that way? I don't know. But these carburetor shafts will only accept the seal right there. That doesn't take a seal, that doesn't take a seal, and this is a closed end here, so there's nothing. And when it's all in the car, this is where having Amy is a really good reference point. You can see how I engage the throttle, and it doesn't make any contact with that bottom shaft. Okay, here's the bottom shaft. That's the one on the manifold. And so we're at light throttle, and then about 3/4 throttle starts to open those. I think there's some adjustment that can be made. I don't know how much, because it seems like the orientation of this to the carburetor shafts are quite static. So without extreme modification, there's nothing I can do there. But I don't want to modify it because I want this to work as it's originally intended to work. I want my carbs to operate fully functionally, which is why I'm going to be taking the hot start valve here on the backside, and I'll be using that on Ivy. There's a temperature valve here, which is this guy, and I'm not using that, so I thought I had a block-off plate, but all the block-off plates are actually smaller for the non-fuel injected heads. Who knew? So that one has to get plugged off as well, and I had to order that from VP. Still have 2 sensors that need to get capped, this one and this one. I don't know what they are, but I can borrow the other one from this head, which is this sensor here and the little black guy there. They're all fuel injection stuff, so they're not important for us. But if I did want to add like a coolant temperature sensor, that could be a good spot for it, any of those 3 holes. And then I was spending a lot of time on the air conditioning setup. You know, some people say, yes, you can rebuild your York to use one R134A. Other people are saying, don't use the York, go to the Sandins. That's fine. Everything's fine. All right, here's the passage open. You see there's this chamber here, but then there's the larger chamber, which is with the opening of the throttle plates, the backside here. So the small guy goes there when it's closed. Just a fraction of the air that you could get through. Lots of carbon buildup, that's kind of expected. I'll see what I can do by cleaning all this up and then smoothing some of the passages that this air needs to take. That might be a bit of a large task, but at least I have one of these. Like I said, it might peel off on the first warm-up, but I do feel pretty good having this painted black. I'm hoping the intake side stays a little cooler with just the air kind of flowing through, that fresh ambient air. But, you know, it'll get toasty, especially because it shares a casting with the exhaust manifold. If you guys want to talk about weird attention to detail in kind of strange places, then let me discuss with you throttle bracketry. The throttle bracket uses a screw, and it goes up from the top down. And I kept the old hardware, and then I couldn't remember, does this have a washer or not? So here's how you solve that problem. Go here to gcp.se/English, search in the part number that I want, then show me all the cars that use that piece, but we're looking at specifically the 164. There's several pages that show that, but we'll go to the first one here, and it looks like we're in the exhaust system. Eventually we get over to throttle linkage, and then I can expand on that, and it shows me that number 16 was the clip that we're looking for, but I'm trying to find out what size is the screw, because you don't want to go too deep with that screw, and is there a washer? And sure enough, on the bottom of that bracket there is a washer, and the screw is number 25. So then I can go here, look at number 25, which is screw 955512. Shows me that it is a 1/4 by 20 bolt, but they call it a screw, and it's 13 millimeters or 1/2 inch long. So in that case, I have discovered that this throttle linkage uses a 13mm thread on that screw and a little washer at the bottom. Washer number 26 in the catalog is called resilient washer, which in Volvo speak here is a wave washer. So at the end of all that, I have a 13mm screw and I have a very thin wave washer, and I know that that's exactly what needs to be on that throttle bracket. Could I have just gone and rummaged through some drawers and stuck whatever? Yeah, but why do I care so much? Something is absolutely wrong with me. My brain is weird, and I don't really understand it right now, so I can't get those to aim the same way, can I? See? Something's wrong here. But at least it's coming together. 2-core like the other one, but it does have the transmission cooler on the bottom, and it seems to be a little lighter than the other radiator, but it seems thinner as well. The other one comes out a little bit more toward the edge, so I might get better clearance with the fan because that's always a question mark. But right now, I got to get the AC condenser in. This is also the condenser from 74, February 19th, 1974. And then there's this corner here in the grill, here and here. I trimmed a little bit of the heat exchanging little aluminum fins there. Just took a snip to them, and thankfully the hydraulic line was out of the way. But yeah, it's now missing a corner to accommodate that corner. Yeah, it's a little custom, but the original one in here was trashed, so there's no good chance of using it. And then the one in Amy, it's not really in great shape. I'm sure it works, but how long will that last? Anyway, this just feels like a better, more modern version. And for 20 bucks, I figured, what do I got to lose? Just gonna make a hole here and hope for the best. Two brackets on the right side are the original ones. You see one hole here for it. This is the new hole we drilled, and then this is an original old hole, and that's an original old hole, but I had to make it larger, mostly on that side and up. I think the grill will be just fine to clear it. The big Q right now is, are we going to have any fitment issues with the radiator? And it sort of encroaches on the back side a little bit. You see this line is kind of vertical, and then this sort of slopes forward, but it looks vertical, so it could just be that this slopes back. Can't be sure, but you see the effect on that side. Only needed the holes readjusted on this end of the bracket. See the cracks in this? Yep. That lower hose is a little too stiff, a little too rough, and I don't think it's gonna be long for this world. I think that one went right to the receiver dryer. This one's got a lot more bend to it, but still pretty stiff. I'm gonna have to redo all these hoses, which means whenever I take this to a shop to do AC work, they're gonna have to pull the radiator out so they can get access to all this and hopefully make sense of my mess. I'm noticing that the seals in here are copper. They're not O-rings, rubber O-rings. Isn't that interesting? You can't have everything go easily. Some things are unexpected, and right now it is the fan shroud. I've got the original 5-blade fan that came in the car, and that fits fine in the shroud, and I made an oopsie and I didn't get the shroud from the 73, 74 cars that were there at the junkyard, so I'm gonna have to trim my shroud just ever so slightly. Well, better half a shroud than no shroud. At least this will get me, nice, made it, until I can buy a shroud and have it show up later. The accessories are in on the engine. That would be the alternator and the power steering. It took me a while to figure out this power steering bracket because you can put it on upside down, but it really just only goes one way. Take a look though, because it'll save you a lot of trouble of digging up diagrams or old photographs. Annoying thing about this power steering is the bracket in the front that is the aluminum bracket that goes around it and then bolts up to the red bracket. That has metric bolts for whatever reason, including the tensioner bolt. I got the expansion tank washed and put in. Here's a photo of the one that came out of the car before cleaning it. And this one's much prettier because it's not so stained. This is from the junkyard car. But the condenser's taking up quite a bit of space, so I think the horns are gonna end up going underneath where the bumper is, like the ones on Amy. You see how they're hanging there? There's an option to mount them right to the bumper bracket, so I'm gonna do that. I've got myself a little friend here. This is a tiny little orb weaver. I quite like spiders, so it's cool to see this. I've got a little bit of company. Don't lose my sanity. Gosh, it starts to feel like you're in a prison and you're just looking at the seagulls. Nope, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so the original water pipe, this is the part that goes into the pump, and then it goes straight back, and look at that, it points straight up. On the later cars, it does this. So the heater hose that I had was made for one of these, and it wouldn't fit one of those. So my solution was to make a long loop-de-loop that goes into the heater. And that's what you see here. It's too bad, but everything else seems to work out quite nicely. This has a transmission cooler on the bottom of the radiator, and I don't want to run it empty if it's going to be a problem. If it's not going to be a problem and I can run it empty, I'm just going to run it empty. If I need to fill it with something, you all should let me know. Oh, the throttle adjustment. Not the throttle adjustment, but the throttle linkage. It's all in place here. Oh, I like hearing the grease. Oh, another bolt that I had a long, difficult time finding was the bolt that goes right here. I mixed it up with one of the bolts for the bell housing, and it ended up over there with my transmission. The shelves are slowly emptying, little bit, piece by piece, but stuff is kind of everywhere, and it's a little overwhelming, but honestly, tonight's a rare good mood, and I'm gonna take that victory all the way. I called Bob of Bob's Brackets, and he does air conditioning brackets for the Sandin compressors, which are modern rotary style compressors versus this. And it's basically a glorified air pump here. The rotary ones, I think, use little hockey pucks in a circle that actually are very efficient. They take less power and they move more air. The air conditioning compressor has 2 bolts there that bolt to the compressor, but then that bracket is actually bolted to that other large spot that is for the power steering pump, which is why I've disconnected these 2, and the darn thing is still attached to the car. Slowly but surely, see you tomorrow. Everybody's got that secret build. Here's a frustrating thing. There's like 5 different sizes of these center carrier bearing rubber bushings, and I can't find one. I just can't seem to find the one that I need to work in this car. This is the original one in the car, and it did use a spring. It's a 69, so it shouldn't be that hard, but then you go into some of the other ones, like this is the later 164s. That's pretty standard with a 240, very big. The earlier ones that are early 70s cars that still had like the B20, for example, use this. The center's too small, and of course it's too big here, and I could not fit this inside of my tunnel. So I got the smaller size. BP sells that for the 69 model year, and it gets close, but just seems a little small as well. I don't know. I'm ready to just put this guy back in because the center hole also looks like it's going to be quite a big ask to stretch this into this and down to that. So it's early in the morning, and this is too bad that it's the first thing I'm coming up against is a little bit of a roadblock. Checkity China, the Chinese mic check. Okay. This distributor is my next task right now. As things are slowly getting put back together, I did the drive shaft today. I consumed a lot of caffeine. I accidentally breathed some Monster energy drink up my nose, which then gave me the jitters. So if we could powder this thing, I think we're really onto something here, folks. But right now I'm working on distributors. This is my original distributor. It has a vacuum advance in 2 directions. Maybe one's vacuum retard, one's advance. The later distributors, this one here, is actually a 4-cylinder distributor, but notice it's the same size as the 6 on that, but then a lot of the other 6s, big bodies, yeah, the big girls. This is a distributor from a fuel-injected 164E. I have an ignition control module, and I kind of jumped the gun by asking a question on the Facebook group, but thankfully they're kinder than turbo bricks. Well, why don't we just review here? The B30 engine, the JFUR6 Bosch, the PFUX6, or as I like to call it, the FUX6, has a breaker, but if you have the PGFUX or the PGFUX6, then that is a B30F for North America, 1 year only, 1975, breakerless distributor. Wow, it'd be nice to get one of those. 02313011014, and there's the PGFUX6, and just for fun, this is probably a B20 fuel-injected distributor, and it says JFURX 4. For 014, and by the look of all the metal shavings around there, I could tell that the bumps on this are actually pretty worn down, and by rotating it you can see that it barely budges the points breaker there, so it's completely worn out. That is a function of I guess lack of maintenance for the most part, because you're supposed to oil these distributor shafts every once in a while. That actually reminds me to oil the one in my 122. This one is what was in the car when I took it out, and it runs, so I'm gonna go ahead and go with that. Condenser's new. Our contact breaker points gap is set to 0.01 inch or 1/4 millimeter. The distributor rotates anti-clockwise, and the funniest thing I've heard in a while about remembering the firing order, 15 is too young, 36 is too old, 24 is just right. The breakerless ignition system uses this module, which I have, for 1 year only. There's like one other V8 somewhere in the world that used that module. As we have it set to 0 on our crank, number 1 is at top dead center there, but we need to know, is it on the compression stroke or is it the end of the exhaust stroke? So with those marks aligned, and this at number 1, this distributor has 2 halves and they're not evenly cut. It's like a 60-40 split. The small one is up top and then the bottom one is the larger. If that were flipped around and you didn't have the rocker assembly to figure out compression or any of that, then that would be number 6 at top dead center. Also, the engine is so hard to turn right now. I don't know what's going on. I think it's upset at me for leaving it alone. Hopefully it loosens up. But I remember David Hunt saying his rebuilt B16 was really hard to turn. He can't turn it by hand either. That's in the P1900. When number 1 cylinder is at top dead center, the oil pump, the small part at the groove, is turned obliquely upwards, backwards, and the groove is set at an angle of 35 degrees. That's the angle between this and that. Make sure that the shaft goes down in its groove in the pump, because sometimes it sits on the top of that. And you need to make sure it goes all the way down. When the timing gears are opposite each other, then piston number 6 is in the top dead center position. I'm gonna set the distributor to number 1. I'm gonna see if she fires up. I'll set the clearances on everything. Well, the whole point now is that the covers are on and I can't see what the orientation are of those timing marks. I've got to do static timing from here on out. This is the way it works. We have our intake manifold here going to this valve, the intake valve, and then the number 2 valve is our exhaust. We're currently on the exhaust stroke, so that means that this exhaust valve is depressed, which means that it is exhausting the gases in the cycle. The intake valve will then breathe in air, and then it will compress. At the top of that compression stroke, both of these valves will be relaxed from their guides, from the rocker arms, and they're going to have a little bit of wiggle, kind of like that. And when that happens, we're going to set this to 0. I have marked on the crankshaft both 0 and 16. 16 is going to come in a little bit later. But we'll set it at 0, and then I'll check my distributor timing gear. Hopefully it's in the correct orientation. Something worth noting, it became incredibly difficult to turn this engine by hand. Well, I can't turn it by hand. I have to use my deep socket. It's a 13/16. And it was tightening the bolt, and it even got to the point where I was like, is my crank bolt on the pulley going to strip out? Because it was exceeding the torque specifications for that bolt. Usually the crank turns before it does that. I think the new piston rings are punishing me, and they haven't broken in yet. And the exhaust stroke is happening on number 6 as number 1 is finishing its intake and about to begin compression. And it looks like our drive gear is upside down. Either I installed it incorrectly, or I'm not understanding something here. So back to our firing order, 15, 36, 24. 1 is straight up there. You can feel the detents in the wheel here in the distributor, so you can find where number 1 is. But the easier way to do that also is look for the little mark there. I put Sharpie on it. That's our mark for number 1. And that's where number 1 bump is on the wheel of fortune. Set this to 1, and then if you look at it from the bottom, you can see the small half on the right, the larger half on the left. The small half is pointing up with the distributor in place like that. So if we were to kind of view it top down, it should match our distributor gear, which is currently upside down. So here's what I'll do. I'll flip the distributor gear around, and we'll just hope for the best. You'll notice that it spins as it comes out because of this helical cut in the gear. Now, we want to make sure that this gets seated all the way into the oil pump at the bottom, which does give it a final little twist, so it's possible that you could be off a tooth, and it looks right, but then it drops into its final position and changes its final setting. Sometimes the oil pump needs to be turned, especially if the engine is turned with the gear out of place, but because I'm doing a full 180, the flatness of it is the same into the pump, and going in, it should be already aligned. But if you turn the engine with that shaft out, put a screwdriver in there to turn the pump, or put a screwdriver in there to turn the pump, basically. It's a straight shaft down. One way to check that it is properly seated all the way at the bottom is to put this guy back in, and it should be flush with the block. So there it is. We're at number 1 compression stroke. This guy's aligned. When it comes to valve adjustments, not all methods are created equal. Let's just take a look at what is this, the Haynes is trying to tell us to do. It says put cylinder 1 top dead center, and then that puts number 6 arms in balance. In balance describes the situation where the inlet rocker arm is just about to descend, while at the same time the exhaust rocker arm of the same cylinder is about to reach its highest point, allowing the valve to close. The movement can be observed by moving the crankshaft pulley slightly in one direction and then the other. Too many steps already. And then it says rotate crankshaft. You can set 9 and 10, and then the balanced valves are 3 and 4. Rotate crankshaft 5 and 6, 7, 8 are in balance. It's too many steps. Here's what the Green Book does, and it's so much better. Valve clearance can be adjusted satisfactorily with the engine stationary, irrespective of whether it's cold or warm. The clearance is the same for both inlet and outlet. This one splits the difference in the feeler gauges because it's between 0.020 and 0.025. The Green Book, I like this method so much more. Grab a go, which is the 0.5, which is the minimum, and a no-go, 0.55, the maximum. And then adjust the clearance so that the thinnest gauge can be inserted easily, while the thicker one must not enter. This is the best part. When piston number 1 is at top dead center, adjust valve 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 10. Boom. 1 full rotation of the crankshaft. Number 6 is now at top dead center. Adjust 4, 5, 8, 9, 11, 12. So much faster. Wow. Because sometimes the no-go starts and it goes about halfway, and that's when you start thinking, oh, is it going? But no. Beautiful new day, and it's time to start the engine pretty soon. She's not leaking. Well, I'm a nervous wreck. Things are going too easy, and, well, I don't know what to expect now. 164 owners tend to swear by Valvoline's racing oil, which is VR1. It's a high zinc compound. You see the yellow marking here, high zinc, for extreme anti-wear protection. Basically, old engines use flat tappet cams. Flat tappet cams could use a little bit of zinc. Whew. I keep thinking I'm going to be forgetting something like super important. This has been such a journey getting to this point that I almost, it fought me every step of the way at the beginning. Why would it give up now? Anyway, I gotta stop thinking like that. Gotta get some positivity here. Okay, we have amp light and oil light. You wanna see if she'll crank? Ooh. Oh, she sounds good. Let's get that oil light off, please. 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 Ugh, are we getting oil pressure? Come on. And if she does decide to fire off, there's going to be a lot of smoke out that tailpipe, which is aimed at the bell housing down there. I'm sweaty because I was just getting up and down to turn the crank, and the camera stopped rolling, unfortunately. But it's time to set timing. It was cranking really slow, like the battery was getting low, and then it started cranking up faster. And then the oil pressure light went away. So that first maybe 30 seconds or maybe 45 seconds of cranking, she was running on just assembly lube, which is where the wear can happen, and then the oil pressure finally built up. So this is where priming the pump, I guess, is very important. Something I thought about doing but didn't do. She's an old Volvo though, she'll be alright. Like I said, assembly lube and then the crosshatch should really be there to help for that. Now it's time to, I've put it at 16 degrees before top dead center. I'm going to turn the distributor until it just sparks on the valve cover with the number 1 wire, and that's how you know it's set. So it's just before 1, and what we're going to be doing is rotating the distributor clockwise, which brings the number 1 contact closer to the rotor where it's at now, and checking for spark on this guy right here. I think I'm gonna put a plug on it. Ah, right there. Okay, we want it to be right where the spark hits. All right, ignition is set 16 degrees before top dead center. Now let's get back to cranking, huh? Let's start this puppy now. She's starting. Sounds so good. She's so quiet up there. That's amazing. You gotta seat those rings in, so I gotta keep revving it up and down a little bit. It's amazing. I just feel very, very happy right now. Also very hydrocarbons. Starting to get a little warm, that's good. Put a blow by down there, I'm gonna investigate. Oil there. That's some valve cover leak on the back of the head. Looks like, oh. We lost a freeze plug. What? Ah, darn.
Cooperating here, and there's no
Sir.
Man, I just went from high highs to low lows. What a bummer. Plus I lost 2 gallons of coolant. Boo. A freeze plug is not the end of the world, but that's a bummer. I don't know. I don't know what to do now. I'll have to reach out to the guys and be like, how could you? And try something else. This is gonna be it for the first start video. I'm gonna wrap it up. What a weird thing. It's like being handed a pizza and then getting shot. But she runs. She sounds good. And thanks for watching.